Morning and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Power of Field Through Financials. I'm Whitney Daly. Jenny Olvera and I will be hosting today's session. We have a few housekeeping items to go over before we start. Today's session is being recorded, and we will email the recording to everyone that registered for the webinar. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please send your questions to everyone via the chat panel. We don't anticipate any issues, but if we happen upon a technical glitch and the session ends, please try logging back in. I'll now pass it over to Tim Wadley to get us started. Tim.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about the next evolution of upstream oil and gas software. I've been working in upstream oil and gas software for more than 28 years with experience from small operations up to the majors, super majors, and international operations. And in that time, I have seen the focus of software really shift from point solutions that are specific to one department and one process to now focusing more on connecting business processes across departments, from the field through financials, across the organization, and connecting data in a way that will streamline business processes, reduce effort and data errors, and increase visibility into that operations. I am currently VP of Integrated Solutions at P2 Energy Solutions. And with me today, I have Deborah Bryson, who's going to be representing accounting and accounting department, David Grisanti, production operations, and Sarah Caldwell, who appears to be on a beach somewhere, representing land and land administration. So before we get any further, I'd like to turn it over and get some thoughts from industry experts on what they think about field through financials.
Hi, I'm Christina Savage. I'm the Vice President of Accounting Controller here at Stewart Energy. I've been working in the oil and gas industry for about 10 years now. When I think about field through financial processes, I think of the flow of data across departments so that people are not keying data into multiple systems or using emails and spreadsheets to manage data across systems. I think that the field through financial process of being streamlined and not entering into multiple systems is absolutely where everyone's trying to be more efficient, and that's where we're headed.
Hi, my name is Edgar Tobias, and I've been working for a little over 13 years in oil and gas, and I'm currently a production accounting manager. I think of it as a single system of a point of data that can be utilized for an entire company to maintain that same subset of data without there being discrepancies between different records of different applications within the company. So for example, like production, in our environment, we use our wells, we use our completions, meters, tanks as the single source of record for pretty much everything that promulgates through the different applications within our environment. We spend countless hours collecting that data, cleansing it, refining it, and then allocating that data and processing that information, reporting it to the different entities that require it, internally and externally. Now, with that same subset of data, we ensure that we have accurate data through automation and processes through like our interoperability with P2 Connect and other applications. And then with that, we ensure that other departments use that same subset of data instead of utilizing imports or recalculating and rekeying information. And that cuts down on any errors that could be, come from just the process itself. And this ensures that they're actually using the actuals that we booked and reported to the state throughout the rest of the processes through JVA and revenue and such.
What do you see as the primary value for your company overall from this field through financials process?
Really, honestly, it's the fact that you can provide transparency between each of our teams and each of our departments and reduces those manual efforts. And then, as I stated, it cuts down a lot of those errors. So if you're doing manual processes, keying in information or calculating stuff to Excel, you could lead to some errors and values. And you just need to be able to cut out or minimize that stuff so it doesn't exacerbate an issue down the road where you could have been incorrectly booking something because of how it was transposed into the system.
I'm Taylor Warren. I'm the Vice President of Land at Stewart Energy. I've been working in upstream oil and gas for more than 15 years. I really look at it as assimilating all the necessary data, and that data can be from as complicated as ownership data all the way through some pretty easy type of information, but it's still critical having the correct addresses, tax ID, and then your contractual information as well, due dates and rates and things of that nature. All of this makes accurate payments that need to be distributed on time and efficiently to our owners. And this can be for a number of reasons. I mean, it can be for setting up new contracts, new lease bonuses, or maintaining existing contracts. And it's not just oil and gas leases, it's damages for surface use agreements. It's term assignments that might have a rental. It's a number of different contracts.
So as Christina, Edgar, and Taylor indicated, it's really about data and processes. And when we look at a typical upstream oil and gas org chart, you have very clearly defined departments, and those departments historically have siloed data, siloed business processes within those departments. But if you look at this slide, it's easy to see that there are many personas where processes and data span the organization and span departments. And so, when we think about field through financials, this is really the processes and the data that we're looking at to automate and to manage and to streamline those business processes. From an executive standpoint, having consistent data ensures that accuracy and visibility into the operations. Historically, they really struggled to get, and I think even today in the industry, it's hard to get. If they are getting that data, then they have a team of people that are using spreadsheets to bring data together from different systems, and they're massaging that and managing that data on a monthly basis. One of the prerequisites to be able to provide that visibility is that the solutions that you have in place have to be deep and robust. If you're doing things in spreadsheets, calculating tax or regulatory reports, because the applications don't support that, then obviously, even if the systems are connected together, you're not going to be able to see that data. Historically, the majors and super majors have done this, bought independent solutions, and then they had the resources to be able to move data around and be able to provide some of this, but it really didn't solve all of the problem. So if we look at, why a single vendor or a single system is so important, I'm going to go through three key reasons, and probably the biggest one is this reconciliations. When you have the same data being set up in multiple solutions, that could be manually entered, it could be even coming in from maybe spreadsheets or third-party sources. But if you have that data, the wells, the ownership, the parties, the agreements, if that information is going into multiple systems, you're going to have reconciliations between those systems, and you're going to have differences between the systems. And it is extremely time consuming, much more time consuming than people give it credit. We have done analysis of companies, how much time they're spending reconciling like wells. It's very common to get into a room and people sit down and say, well, how many wells do we operate? And there's different numbers coming from different departments. And so having that single place of entry, single system of record, and not having to reconcile across systems is very, very important. Next, we have the logic differences. So if you have different solutions, they're going to have differences in meaning. And the example I like the best is this first subpoint here, talking about producing status. From a production standpoint, if you say, what is is the production status, they're going to say, well, is the well producing this minute? Is it producing right now? If you ask an accountant, they're going to say, well, did the well produce within the month that I'm processing? Can I charge jib to this? Is there any revenue associated with this well? And from a land perspective, production status is, well, what are the terms of that agreement that I have? And what's the shut-in clause? Is it 60 days? Is it 90 days? In those examples, the same production status is looked at in 3 very different ways. And being able to manage that effectively is very, very important. Let me give you another example. The second bullet point here. No, go back. I'm sorry. To the company. If you have different systems, in that second example, a company overpaid revenue by $8 million. And the reason they overpaid is because they weren't taking all their deducts. They had one system, their land system, where they were putting in their deducts, and they could put unlimited number of deducts. And then in their revenue system, they only managed a few deducts. And so there were a whole bunch of deducts that were not being taken or managed by the revenue. And it was a difference in that business logic that really drove that. And of course, once they paid out the 8 million, they weren't able to collect that. That's not something that you can do. But there are way more examples of this logic difference between applications than people think about. And again, when you're thinking about, hey, this is one silo of data, and you're not thinking about how that merges across departments. The last example is really about timing differences. So timing difference, if you go to the next slide, the timing differences, different departments operate on different timelines. So if you're processing revenue and your production isn't finalized, then that may cause PPAs. Or if somebody's making an ownership change that needs to be put in prior to revenue distribution, so that you're not paying somebody who the incorrect person, then that has to be all fit together in a logical way. It can't be. Many customers of ours process PPAs, extensive number of PPAs, and sometimes even more PPAs than original transactions. And when you're processing PPAs, not only does that take you a lot of time to do that, but it also means that you're making decisions on data that is incorrect. And if you're making poor business decisions, then that's leading to the quality of your business and your operations. So the next slide, let's look at the high level business view of field through financials. The top left, we look at field operations. So the well is producing, there's data being collected on a daily or sometimes minute basis. That's feeding into production operations where they're doing daily reports. They're managing the well. They're focused on optimizing the production of that well and optimizing the delivery of those products to sales. But that production information, that sales information, then feeds revenue and JVA, the oil and gas accounting, as well as then ultimately the financial accounting. On the lower path, the same thing happens on the land side. The brokers in the field acquiring land, they're working with the landowners, working interest partners, and feeding into that land administration, making payments for shut-ins and those types of processes, ownership changes. all of that again feeds revenue and JVA, and then ultimately financial accounting. If you don't have this really end-to-end process and all connected together, then what happens is you have disconnects. You have data being entered in multiple systems. You have poor data quality that could be potentially leading to poor business decisions. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Deborah, representing accounting, and Dave on production operations to talk through a couple of very specific examples of how a single vendor, a single end-to-end solution can support field through financials.
Thank you, Tim. While I have worked with oil and gas software as a customer and now as a software provider, it is really exciting to see how innovative ways of connecting business processes is now leading to industry solutions and several customer successes. Let's hear from Christina Savage again.
Another example of field through financial processes is having master data like our wells set up in one system of record, which for us is BOLO. So that doesn't have to be entered into multiple systems and then reconciled between all of those systems.
I mentioned two critical aspects of accounting: managing master file data and reconciliation. When we create the well, the Smith well 24H2 will be our example. From a new permitted well or an acquisition, the details of that well are shared across business groups. Since the single source of data is accounting, there's consistency in reporting when establishing well names for AFEs and revenue checks, API numbers for regulatory reporting, and operators for production and marketing detail. That same well, the Smith well number 24H2, is recognized and utilized throughout your organization. We have eliminated the reconciliation step so production, accounting, and land can simply begin their respective business processes, saving valuable time and experiencing greater accuracy when evaluating and reporting data. As the well status moves from drilling, where we need to manage costs, to producing, the production team takes over. Now let's hear from David Grisanti.
Thanks, Deborah. Once the well is set up and starts producing, it's available to me in the production domain with all the relevant details from accounting. I can then include other production-related information. An important step is adding the Smith well to an allocation network and a gathering system in preparation for capturing both daily and monthly volumetric allocations. With the well setup complete in production, my field team can begin capturing and syncing field readings. The production system offers a depth and breadth of functionality, including tracking complex allocation scenarios with multiple products and dispositions, accurately capturing lease use for regulatory reporting, and sales for revenue accounting. One critical aspect is that the system has field data capture included and can accurately allocate daily and monthly production all in one place, tracking both operational and volumetric data like you see in these graphs. I then QC this production information. I lock the gathering systems to make the data available for regulatory reporting, economic modeling, and most importantly, to pay our owners in revenue accounting. Back to you, Deborah.
As David has demonstrated with the Smith well allocation within production, the monthly detail is now available within accounting. Production from the Smith well includes 8/8 or total production for oil, gas, natural gas liquids, water, and dispositions like lease use, flare, house gas, and lift. Production, especially sales, can now be utilized throughout accounting. Sales volumes are utilized for pricing for distribution agreements, which are then used for revenue distribution. Dispositions like lease use and flare are actually used for state reporting and some revenue distribution obligations. Payday's production or sales can also be used for joint interest cost center allocations as the basis for allocating LOE expenses. Well statuses from production are used for overhead calculation. And when a reduction in production or zero volumes they are utilized within land to comply with land lease minimum royalty or shut-in payment obligations. As you will hear from another industry expert, Edgar Tobias, Edgar will emphasize the full circle of consistent data critical to vital oil and gas company with synchronized master file data, production, and ownership data. In addition to evaluating production for contracts, joint interest billing, and revenue distribution, accounting manages ownership. Gross and net ownership is available by well or any cost center. Readily report the company interest or total working interest of owner gross and net positions for LOEs, AFE budgets, payout reporting, etc. Let's hear again from Edgar.
It's not just a one-way street. So we also pull data from the EU system application.
That's your accounting system?
Correct. And we pull that same subset of the data back the other way, going towards our production systems. And that allows us to get some of the information at the owner level and budgets and a few other things that we kind of house in our financial system. And that in turn allows a few folks within our team to be able to provide accurate partner reporting in a mass scale. That's a process that we no longer have to do, manually at all. And then in addition, it also provides full transparency to the field in terms of their budgets, and kind of gives the guys, the pumpers and the foremen, the opportunity to see how they're performing at their level with what the expectation is, what the budgets are for that particular well or for that particular route. So it gives them a good goal to strive for.
So back on the production side, I can leverage the efforts of the accounting team who've been capturing expenses, approving invoices, and booking revenue. I can view this detail in the context of my own domain, scaling the producing asset hierarchy and opening a Carte view, in this case that shows me gross and net costs compared to BOE. This gives me a graph, as you see here, of cost per BOE. I can then open a lease operating statement and dig into the details of my monthly expenses, understanding the transactions behind them. Next, I'll turn this over to Sarah, who's going to walk us through the land check management workflow.
Thank you, David. Before we jump into that, though, let's hear from Taylor again on his thoughts about the industry trend to move towards more automated field to financial processes.
Probably more than a trend, really, probably more of a requirement. Every day, fee ownership, it continues to get fractionalized, right? And it's at a compounding rate. And if you're not automating, it's going to catch up with you. You can't throw enough people at these type of operations in order to continue to maintain your contracts on a timely manner and an accurate manner without some sort of automation.
And here's Christina again, speaking to land checks as an example of the automation that Taylor was just discussing.
One example we have is our land checks that are entered and managed by the land department into our landman, and they flow seamlessly through accounting with no manual entry on our side. This business process saves us about 20 to 30 minutes per check.
All right, let's take a closer look at the land check process that Christina just described. So as she mentioned, the land team is responsible for entering and managing the various types of land checks, such as extensions, bonuses, shut-ins, etc. So if that Smith well is shut in and payments are due to the owners, I would then kick off the process by entering a payment request into the land system.
Then, through automation, this payment request is now in accounting, where a payment request, a payment voucher is created. From an accounting perspective, there is nothing more for me to do. The request from land is ready for payment. In accounting, I can make the payment as a physical check or an electronic ACH payment within the next hour, the next day, or the next week, whatever is appropriate for my accounts payable business cycle.
And once accounting has processed the payment or payments, the details of those payments are automatically updated and then accessible to me in the land system. So you can see here in the original land payment request that I created, it's been updated with the check details from accounting. It also has a paid status, letting me know that this payment has completed the full cycle. Now let's hear from Taylor and Christina. Again, they're going to share some additional benefits that Steward has experienced by automating their field to financial processes.
What I didn't expect to see was helping maintain schedules. Before automating payments, we were constantly creating check requests on a daily basis. And whether that check request was for a lease bonus or for surface damages or a right-of-way payment, it was a never-ending process. And it's still never-ending, but with being able to automate, you really are able to put a time frame on the length of time that it's going to take to get these payments created and through the process.
The final example I can think of is the ability to see data across departments when needed. Land is able to see our ownership data from accounting through our landman. Another example is our production foremen and engineers are able to see our LOS data in the production application.
Thanks, Deborah and Dave and Sarah, for those examples. As we think about those examples, there are some common threads, for you to think about from your own operations. It's about connected workflows across departments, being able to access the data when and where you need the data without having to go to a separate solution or ask somebody else for that data. When you're trying to determine a shut-in payment in land, you shouldn't have to go ask the production foreman what that production or when the last time that well produced. You should have that information at your fingertips, and being able to manage that is really what drives this field through financials. And I think this is really not just a trend, but something that is evolving and is required. And as we continue to focus on this, the reality is it's going to make everybody, you're going to be making better decisions, you're going to have better visibility into your operations, and ultimately you're going to be more profitable. And that is really what we are all in business to do, right? To increase our margins, and by improving our accuracy and our processes, we're going to be able to do that. So we're going to have one last thought from Taylor, and then we're going to open it up for questions. If you do have questions, please enter them in the chat window, and we'll answer those right after this video.
What do you see as really the primary value for your company, just kind of overall, having field through financial processes in place and using software that supports those processes?
It's really the increased visibility on a lot of different layers. I think first and foremost, it would be from a forecasting perspective. It's the increased efficiency that is able to process what seems like more payments every day, whether those payments are, there again, extension dollars or damage dollars or bonus dollars. The increased in error checking, or the efficiency in error checking.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim, Deborah, David, and Sarah. We are now going to open it up for questions. So as a reminder, please put those questions or comments in the chat panel or window. Be sure to send those to everyone versus one panelist or speaker. So we'll pause for just a moment as we let some of those flow in. Okay, great. We do have our first question here. What is the technology that is used to manage end-to-end processes?
So that's a good question. There's lots of different technologies, and of course, it depends on what your core applications leverage as well. At P2, we've really taken the best and latest technologies following what Salesforce and other marketing leading players are doing. We leverage REST APIs or application program interfaces. We use OAuth security to ensure that data is secure and the connection is secure. And we leverage Azure services. So really leveraging modern technologies. But a lot of that depends, like I said, on what applications you're using and the technology of those applications. Hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Tim. We have a couple more that are coming in. The next one is, how are alerts or notifications sent across departments when adjustments are required? Do the notifications include adjustments to production and ownership?
So there's lots of different ways, I guess, that people are notified. Some of that is within the applications themselves. So there may be processes that have error messages or information if production volumes aren't available for a certain well or facility that you're trying to process, then there may be notifications as a part of that process. One of the things that in addition to that, I guess one of the things that we have at P2 is P2 workflow, which allows you to create alerts, notifications across departments. Even though there's a lot of similarity across, and we've been talking about, the land, production, and accounting departments and domains, but every single upstream oil and gas company also operates in their own manner. And so having something that's flexible that you can configure yourself and manage those notifications and those alerts across the different departments is important. And P2 workflow is what we use for that, to be able to provide that information.
Great, thank you. Looks like we have a couple more questions. The next one is, how have you noticed an improvement in the month-end close cycle? Has the seamless integration and workflow provided a reduced time to close during month-end?
That's a good question. I'm going to pass that one off to Deborah. It's more of an accounting question. So Deborah, you have this one?
Sure. I think when integration is in place or executed, from experience, both as a customer and as a software provider, the month-end close cycle is reduced by several days. The area where I've seen the most improvement, I can think of 3 or 4. The first one is utilizing the same master file data. I really don't think we can appreciate the step of eliminating that reconciliation really has to the month-end process. From experience, this is key. This is critical. By not having to re-enter data or confirm data, that step alone is just critical. The other one I can think of, or another one, is timely integration of volumes. This step, integrating volumes from a trusted source, we have your production system. This reduces errors. That it eliminates another point of reconciliation. It also reduces prior period adjustments. My experience personally is on the revenue and the marketing side, and PPAs are just not pleasant. You know that you're processing data that's not accurate. And by not having to wait for volume because you're getting the data from your production system in a timely manner, it really reduces the errors. You're not having to do adjustments in a subsequent production period or accounting period. The delays in communication alone are avoided when the data is automated and that you get the data in a timely manner. I think the other area I've seen is consistency in reporting ownership. Again, it can be a timing issue, but by having the ownership available for processing in a timely manner, again, you're able to reduce prior period adjustments. And also the data that you're reporting on is improved. Your gross ownership is accurate, your net ownership is accurate, and that same data is available and consistently available across the organization. So when you're talking across departments, you all know that you're talking about, in our example, the Smith number 24, everyone's using the same well, the same ownership for gross and net. And for that production period, that accounting period, that data is accurate. I think the last one I would think is a workflow. So when you're looking at data and you're trying to bring in data and do the process, within accounts payable or JIB or revenue, you have your own month-end workflow process. You have a closed calendar and you're trying to follow those particular steps. By eliminating having to redo or re-enter data, you can really focus on your processes and you can make sure that the data that you're trying to report is available in a timely manner and you're able to meet your particular department's deadlines. So the time savings is really critical. And I think that the days and hours that you spend, even if it is simply a few hours, it's a significant improvement to the end of month close cycle.
Thanks, Deborah. I think that, just building on that a little, there is, I think 3 or 4 days is probably the minimum. I've seen clients reduce their close cycle, their accounting close cycle, by up to a week or even longer, depending on what their current processes look like. So there's certainly a lot of inefficiencies to be saved by having the automation that Deborah was just talking about. So, Whitney, any other questions?
Yeah, a couple more. Let's see, the next one is for master data management, we have the issue of having many systems that do not naturally talk to each other. How do you recommend supporting MDM processes within a company structure since it requires both IT and business involvement?
Yeah, so there's several different ways to approach a master data management. I think my preferred method is really to identify the business process of where that entity or where that master data resides first, and where does it need to be first, and what is the data that's collected for that, and that some of that's based on your business. So if you're drilling and you have a lot of AFEs, then that well needs to be set up in accounting before it's producing. Because you have cost against that well. And so an ideal place to have the master data for the well would be accounting. If you are, primarily buying operations and buying wells, then the first place that are already producing, then a lot of times the first place that well needs to exist is in your production system. So you have to base it upon your system. There are other, let me just say that once you have it in a system, then it's back to the technologies that I was talking about before, using application program interfaces, using, Azure services and security models. You can use an event queue, a pub sub model where, hey, I have a new well, or I have a well change that post an event, which then, other systems can subscribe to and populate those systems so that you're not rekeying that data. That is my preferred approach, and I've been doing this for a long time. I do know clients that have used standalone master data management systems. The reason that I prefer the approach that I discussed is because in upstream oil and gas, you really have about 8 to 10 really key master data points. You don't have hundreds. Some other businesses, retail and manufacturing, you have a lot more different types of master data than what we have in oil and gas. And it may not seem that way, but if you think about it, we have wells, we have ownership, we have production, we have parties and names and addresses. You know, those are the key. We have agreements. Those are the key things. And, you know, really understanding within your business what that process flow is going to drive you to what that system should be. So I know I went on a little bit there. Hopefully that that answered your question.
Thanks, Tim. It looks like there's one more, and I think it's a great way to end the webinar today. The question is, where is the best place to start with Field Through Financials?
That is a great question, right? Because there's lots of different ways to look at it. From my experience, the best place or the way to approach it is to look at your business processes, map your business processes, and look for those points where they're you know, very time consuming and costly steps in that process, and you know, where data quality is important. Those are going to be the areas that you're going to want to focus on. You don't want to try to boil the ocean because there's just so many, there really are so many different places to look at, and obviously you want to work with a trusted vendor and partners in that as well.
And I'd like to add something to that, Tim. You know, you mentioned looking at processes that are time consuming, but I think it's important also, you know, if you're really just starting out, to focus on those processes that are extremely critical. And, you know, I'm also coming from a land perspective, but just, you know, like we just discussed, a shut-in payment or any other kind of payment that you're obligated to pay based on the lease, you know, that's a critical process where timeliness and accuracy is key. Because if you lose a lease, depending on the lease, that could be very costly for your company. So looking at, again, key critical processes like that, I think that's another place to really kind of help you get started and where to focus.
That's a great point, Sarah. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. It doesn't look like we have any more questions, so we will go ahead and wrap up. Thanks to our team, all of our wonderful speakers, and thanks to all of you for attending today's webinar. Hopefully you enjoyed it. As a reminder, we will be sending out the recording, so stay tuned for that. This now concludes our session. Hope everyone has a great day.